That's right.
Co-Labbin.
Season 3. We're back.
Season 3.
Wow.
Wow. What a journey. I can't believe we're in season 3.
I know. 3 seasons when we didn't know if we were going to get past 1. So much to celebrate here.
And
So
we're
much.
still
First of all,
here.
Dee, let me just say, just seeing your background, right? Love your background. It's beautiful. You're looking like a queen over there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you.
On your throne.
Am I giving Queen Gems? Thank you.
And you know me.
Thank
You know
thank
me.
you.
I gotta have
Thank you.
my eclectic, vibrant.
Doing all the things.
And I want to. I'm representing
All
right
the
here.
things.
That's my niece's T-shirt line.
Oh, so that's a sponsor for this season? That's a new sponsor, I guess. Okay. No free plugs. No family. No
That's
no
right.
free
You're right.
plugs.
But you know what it says is what's most important.
No, shout out. We love it. We love ownership. We love small Black businesses.
That's
and
right.
We support it
That's
all.
right. That's what this is all about. Supporting one another. This is about Co-Labbin. So you're tuned in to Co-Labbin with Dee and Shawna season 3. Season 3. And we have so much amazing topics and insightful, just what other adjectives can I use here? You know, we're just ready to bring all of this new information and exciting topics.
I'm just ready. I'm ready.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Before I introduce our special guest and my longtime friend, I first want to recognize one of our first sponsors, Girls for Technology. I'm actually recording out of their beautiful space today. So definitely thank them, and you'll hear more about them down the road. So let's get into our initial topic. Ava and I go way back. You know, we grew up in the same town, Middletown, Connecticut. I've seen her doing the work around therapy and just helping families for the last 20 years. And we had to talk to her today because she's doing work that I think will help people with everything that's going on in the world around this toxic environment we're currently living in now. Ava is doing some really interesting work, something that she titled Trauma Bonded Sisters. And she's going to tell us a little bit more about that. It's connected to a new type of therapy or a newer type of therapy around EMDR. So without further ado, I want to introduce my good friend and our special guest who has so much to say and offer you today, Ava Hart. Welcome to Co-Labbin, Ava. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm so excited to be here today, and I am excited to see Dee and you, Shawna. And yes, we've had a long-term friendship, and I'm happy to be here today to talk about some of this challenging but good work that I've engaged in. I am a licensed clinical social worker. I am still practicing in Middletown, Connecticut, where we are from, and I'm really privileged to have had an opportunity to meet with, at this point, over 200 Black women, honestly, all around the country, not just the state of Connecticut, to really start to talk about transgenerational or intergenerational trauma and how to begin to heal. So we in the groups that I run, we talk about past, present, and future, right? So we don't just stay in the trauma or just stay in the challenges, but we start to prepare for, how to get through all this and how to prepare for the future. So thank you. This is very exciting.
Tell us a little bit about, do you want to, we want to talk about, the topic for this first episode is around healing in a toxic culture. So, or I say toxic environment. Tell us a little bit about what it means to be in a toxic environment. What does that look like? How do people recognize that that's
do two things.
What's going
First, I'm
on?
going to start with one of my favorite quotes by Dr. Gabor Mate, and then I'm going to define the definition of toxicity. Okay. So Dr. Gabor Mate says, we may not be responsible for the world that created our minds, but we can take responsibility for the minds with which we create our world. Yes. And that's just an important quote, because it really refers to the fact that, it is what it is, right? We came into this, we were born into this, but we certainly have volition and autonomy to begin to change the way that we see things and change our perspectives. And so now moving into the definition of toxicity, toxicity refers to the degree which a substance, behavior, or environment can cause harm to a living organism, us as people, and have a negative impact on our well-being. And it can be defined in different contexts. So in terms of scientific or medical definition, so toxicity is the capacity of substances such as chemicals or drugs that to cause damage to us, but also social behavior and social context. Toxicity can describe harmful behavior or environments such as toxic relationships or coercive, intimidating relationships or discrimination or favoritism or retaliation, punishing, or threatening. So these are all definitions. Like these are all examples of toxic behaviors. There's corruption, there's suppression of dissent, and there's violation of rights, which we see is particularly in our current political climate.
And so, Eva, I mean, you named a lot of things there, right? And I think some things that are very obvious that we recognize as being toxic, and other things that, I feel like we come across every day. And I think what is so interesting to me is that so many people are in a toxic environment and don't recognize it. So, like, what is that? Like, do you feel like, because I know a part of your work, has to do with, past trauma, and then how past trauma sort of shows up today. Do you think that is why some people are in a toxic environment and don't necessarily recognize that? Because I always think like survival of the fittest, that you would have something that would kick in, to kind of tell you like, I need to get out. But like, why don't we recognize those things that are so like detrimental to our well-being?
That's a great question, Dee. Well, basically conditioning, right? One of my youngest 17-year-old clients said to me once, we all need time to heal and time to unlearn the lessons that they taught us. And she wasn't speaking about anything any person in particular, not our parents, not the environment. She's just like right out of the mouths of babes. Like a statement like that is so huge, but that literally answers your question. Like we've all been conditioned to behave in certain ways even without thinking about it, right? We just certain things in the environment can elicit certain behaviors. And so when you grow up in an environment that's, I'm going to just use the word toxic, or grow up in an environment that doesn't support your overall well-being or development socially, emotionally, physically, spiritually, you develop certain characteristics that often have a negative impact on your interpersonal relationship. So it starts at home, right? You may have challenging relationships with your family members based on some of the belief systems and like I said, some of the things in the environment that you've been exposed to. So that can carry from home to school to work to just the community in general, community at large. And so you're absolutely right. The things that we experience often impact the way that we show up in the world.
You actually host a workshop around this topic, right? And you deal with, 9 different elements around toxicity or a toxic environment. And one of them is lack of accountability, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because is it accountability for ourselves, right? You know what I mean? Or is it calling out the people who you feel like are causing the toxic environment? How does lack of accountability play a role?
People often struggle with accountability and feel discomfort when we use words like that, because I've had people say, "Oh, we don't blame people that have had a hard time, or we don't victim blame." But the reality is, accountability isn't about blaming. It's about letting harmful actions slide. Like that's the opposite of accountability. Gaslighting or deflecting, that's the opposite of accountability. The thing about the lack of accountability, it's perfect for cultivating chaos without consequences. And so when we aren't accountable, we basically allow whatever's going to happen to happen. So a real true accountability is being honest with yourself about your belief systems and what what your boundaries are, what you're willing to accept, and what you're unwilling to accept.
Mm.
And you can say more about lack of accountability as it relates to use, right? So it might be this might be a discussion that you have a lot with your children, right? It might be a
Yes.
discussion you have a lot with your colleagues, right? About
Right.
upper level lack of accountability, because it all affects us on
Mhm.
an individual basis and as a whole.
Listen, wait, we I don't know where
Absolutely.
you was about to go, Shawna, but we just need to stay right there because
Go ahead.
certain things trigger. So when you're talking about
Okay.
that, right? I go right to look. I've been in a corporate environment for a long time. That's so a lot of sort of, I feel like things that I see, and it may not have been me personally, just based due to what I do, right? Is going to be in that space, right? So when you talk about lack of accountability, and I know we're not talking about trauma bonded sisters yet, but I feel like for us, for Black women specifically in a corporate environment, and you say letting toxic culture, letting toxic things slide, right? But then in a corporate environment where things are sort of constructed a certain way, particularly for men and women of color, right? But then when you do call it out, if I'm honest, you're called to the carpet for that, right? So, and I don't know in your work if you deal with or have heard this specifically from Black men and women, and how it sort of shows up in the workplace versus how it shows up personally. But so, and for me, it translates differently in a corporate environment because you have to call it out a certain way. Is there anything that you can give us, our listeners, in terms of how we do that differently, or does it need to be different in a corporate environment for us?
What I'll say is we are living in a like our lives are like a microcosm, right, of the macrocosm. So we live in an environment, right, with our families where we have a little system, and then we go to work where there's a bigger system, right? And then there's our cities, and then there's our country, and then there, right? And so we here in our smaller environment, like we're able to hold one another accountable, right, in our family systems, because we have a set of norms, right? There are cultural expectations that we expect from ourselves, from our children, and because there's this unspoken agreement within family systems that it's like get on board, right, or else. When you're in the work environment, you're beholden to a larger system that was not created by you, right? And so, and when we think about the work environment, right, what is the purpose? The function of that environment is to, I'll just say succeed, right? But also to make money. So we live in a capitalist society, guys. I'm gonna go there. We live in a capitalist society, and so our those systems that are out of our control um, are typically based in production, right? How much we can get out of our cogs that are on this wheel, right? That we are the cogs, right? How much can we get out of our cogs? And so the guidelines and the rules and things that govern that system were not created by us. And when we attempt to influence that system, we are often seen as angry, difficult, a problem. And so, and you'll see, and this is not just based on what I see in my small practice. This is what I've seen all across the country. I was fortunate enough to attend Facing Race, which is the biggest race-based conference in our country. I was fortunate to attend that this year. And we talked about the fact that particularly Black women all across the country, with all the talk about DEI, are being like, despite the credentials, despite the skill set, despite the success, have been blackballed and fired and discredited whenever they try to make changes in a system. So remember, we come with our own set of values, right, and our own set of belief systems, and so that's what make diversity is so important, because when we take different people from different groups and we bring those values together, we bring those belief systems together, we have such a rich environment. But when the system is dependent on one thing and one thing only, it literally does not have space for none of your beliefs and none of your values. And so you need to be quiet and sit down and just follow the blueprint.
I will say I've seen people start to push back a little bit now and like in saying we need, you to support our mental well-being. Like that is not that is a you have to do it. And I feel like corporations are coming to that because they understand that it's a really big thing and they can't ignore it. Like they have to support people's emotional and mental well-being. Otherwise, you really won't have productive, employees.
Exactly, exactly. And if at the end of the day, and you have the statistics to show this, DE and I, or actually caring about the people that work for you, actually affect your bottom line in a positive way, right? You know what I mean? If corporations want the best out of their employees, that's what they have to do. You can't just expect to drain people, right, of their skills and their talents and their physical and mental output, and not give them something back. Yes, you're giving them a paycheck, but clearly, again, we have the information and the resources that tell you that that's not enough. And I actually heard somebody say this, and I thought it was very interesting. DEI is really DEI, and we could say belonging, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I know belonging is a part of that as well. Is really teaching people how to work together, how to come together from different backgrounds and different environments, and how to treat each other in this space, right? With respect. And that's what it should be. Like, we should respect and embrace people's differences. Does it mean ideally you take that home, and you take that home in your community, but people do whatever they want to do. But when you're in the space, we're going to be good to each other. We're going to make sure that there's a fair, things are on a fair and balanced playing ground. But then when you talk about gaslighting, Ava, and lack of accountability, somehow that got flipped on its head. And now they're saying how it actually does the opposite. It doesn't make it a level playing field. But if we go back to why it existed in the first place, it's because things are not fair and balanced, especially for people of color.
So when we show up in environments like the workplace, we often are asked to do things that feel countercultural. We're often asked to engage in particular activities or behaviors that do not serve us well. And here's the thing: I tell people come in my office and they're like, how do you do this every day? Like, how do you hear people's challenges all the time? And I say to them, well, I bring me to this space every day. Like, this is my life right here, right now. Like, I don't shut Ava Hart off when I open these doors. Like, and so that doesn't mean that I'm not going to give them the best theory that I can get my hands on, or it doesn't mean that I don't have great skills, but it does mean that I'm going to show up and be honest and true to me, to my thoughts and my beliefs, in order to give people the best of what I have to offer. And what I have to offer really is helping them think about, right, and go into their subconscious mind and hearts and think about the biases that they carry with them, in order to better understand how they show up in the world, right? If I'm talking to a teacher, like, how do you show up with your students if you're carrying biases that this child that looks like this probably comes from a home that's broken, or maybe they don't have food? Like, when we carry those, our biases, which we all have, right? I like to remind everybody, this is not, we're not immune to having beliefs about people that are incorrect. And that's basically what a bias is, right? Our biases are developed based on the environment, and that includes teachers, that includes our parents, that includes the media, right? All the information that we receive, it makes up who we are and our belief systems. And so I like to tell people that we can have a belief system and a bias that's actually inconsistent with who we are, right? And so we think like we're all good folks, but we also have been, I'm sure, at one time or another, prone to saying something like, well, you know how those people are, right? And we're almost always wrong when we express a bias in that way. And so we all have to be thoughtful about how we think, what we believe, because it certainly affects how we behave and how we show up. So another thing was divisive language. As we're talking about how we behave and how we show up, the spoken word is so important, right? Words can cut deeper than actions at times. Hi, I'm Ava Hart, and you're listening to Co-Labbin with Dee and Shawna. In terms of divisive language, like we see that a lot now in our communities, our political structures. There's information that comes like flashes across all of the screens that we look at on a daily basis, our phone, right?
Mhm.
So even the use of the word DEIB, right? I'll add belonging, DEIB, even the use of that acronym can be now seen as divisive. And I'm gonna break it apart for you all. D, right? Diversity. What on earth is divisive about that word, right? DE, equity. Just think about it. What's divisive about using a word like equity, right? So if we can continue to break it
Right.
down,
That means we.
right, it doesn't make sense.
Oh, I thought you were going to enlighten me because I don't know. What is
Yeah,
it?
no. So that's the good thing about all of this. Like you do know, right? I'm not. I'm going to be here today, and I'm just going to talk with you about some of my experiences and things that I've learned. But what makes me good at this work is I know that you have the answers already. I know that every person that I see, all the healing, all the knowledge, everything that they know that they need to be successful, to be productive, they already possess.
So you said divisive language. We were just talking about that topic before we go into the third element that we're going to cover around, a toxic environment. That one for me is everything, right? I don't think we put enough emphasis on the importance of how we speak to people. And, based on conversations we had, Ava, and even conversations Dee and I have had, I always say this, right? Even within our own relationships, the most intimate relationships we have, how we talk to each other is so important, right? Even how we talk to our children. And I think a lot of times we use language like to get our children's attention, or to get our, maybe it's our spouse or our significant other to kind of get their attention. But sometimes we say things that can cut deep, right? Cut like a knife. So where you said, like you said, we have our microcosm, our environments, our very personal environments that kind of ripple out to the world. I feel like it's all connected. Can you just kind of, am I thinking about this the right way? I just, I really feel for me this is an important one.
Sure. So some of the language that we use. So, for example, when you're at home with your family, and particularly if there's an issue around, I'm just going to use an example around keeping the house clean. We, especially as moms or women, we tend to do a lot of the house cleaning for whatever reason, and that's not the way in every household. Everybody's different, right? That's my bias. But we tend to use words like, well, you always or you never, right? And so those types of statements can be seen as very divisive because we're right speaking in a way that's very affirmative about something that isn't completely true, right? Because I don't have the authority to say what someone always does or what they never do because I am not with a person always, right? And so we unknowingly make these definitive statements that are not true, and they can't be based in truth because we cannot be in a space with someone always, right? We also use words like us and them, like, and this type of language is seen in, right now when we talk about immigration, right? There's things that we see in the media that's intended to frighten us or to scare us into using and accepting divisive language, right? So we people use it, but also people like I'll say like me on a day-to-day basis, like if I'm listening to a podcast or if I'm listening to the news or other mainstream media, like we accept the things that we hear because a lot of us typical lay folks believe that this is the authority. I think now that we have more access, like what you all are doing, more access to more information, people are thinking a little more critically. But for the most part, folks believe what they hear and what they see. And guess what? Whether it's true or not, it becomes the truth. And so that's why our language is so important, and I try to use language that's neutral enough to allow people to develop their own definition or their own sense of belief about that particular issue. And so, like I said, us and them, always and never. We just have to be thoughtful about that type of language, especially in this current climate.
I have a question, and I think it'll help us in terms of transition to the next topic. Can Is divisive language considered an abuse of power? Because when I think of our recent election, I feel like all through the campaign, that's what was happening, right? Like that was used and leveraged to separate us, to divide us. It was definitely a tone of us versus them, and painting the picture as they are responsible for certain things, right? They took certain things which made others sort of feel like they had to go a certain way, go with the person who was going to solve for that issue. So is divisive language considered an abuse of power or used as a tool for abuse of power?
Well, you just said it. You just answered it. And so absolutely, right? Divisive language is a tool for folks that intend to abuse power, right? So power refers to the misuse of authority, right? For personal gain or to control or to harm others. And so one of the best ways to do that is by using language that confuses or divides. So you're absolutely right, Dee. It's a tool.
That is all we're seeing right now. It is frustrating as heck for me because I've been having debates with people around this, and they're all kind of using that same language, that same divisive language, and distraction and confusion is a big one. You know what I mean? And it's just like, it's so evident to me, but you realize there are people that don't recognize that they believe all this information to be true. So it's a little crazy right now. It's a little cray cray. So what are some of the things that people can do? Like we want to focus on healing from this, right? We're in this, we're feeling it. Sometimes it's really hard to articulate. People don't even realize it. Dee, you mentioned earlier the whole flight or fight response. A lot of times we're so tense and stressed, we don't even realize it. Right? We're in these spaces and it's taken a toll on our mental health and well-being. How do we heal from the lack of accountability, from the divisive language, from the abuse of power? Like what should we be doing as individuals, as families, as community members?
Thank you, Shawna. And so you're absolutely right. A lot of times we show up in these spaces, and when these offenses occur, we are automatically in the trauma response. Like we have a trauma response, right? You mentioned fight, flight, freeze. Well, there's also fawn, right? And if you're not familiar with fawning is when you suppress how you feel in order to avoid conflict or to avoid a difficult situation. And people do that actually probably more than some of the other trauma responses.
Mm-hmm.
And so in terms of how to handle yourself.
That gets me. That's a
I know.
We are like opposites, Ava. It's like I have to like hit it like right away, right? Which is not great either because I don't take a beat. It's like, no, you need to know how I feel. Whereas I feel like Shawna will sort of avoid to an extent.
100%.
Like I feel like, and it's like I'm always trying to figure out how to like, I don't want to say tame myself, but kind of tame myself, censor myself, right? But it's so hard. It's really hard for me,
But you know what? See, the way you are helps people like me because we've had
but not everyone. Because I gotta say, like, not everyone. Because I have friends that are not like me.
Okay.
And I recognize that, like with you will. If we have a conversation, like you'll be like, "No, okay, tell me," like say. But other folks are not like me, and it's not okay because I think in the moment, that's me giving you love. I'm telling you, how this makes me feel, what this does. That I feel like that I'm coming from a place of love. I'm telling you, this is how this makes me feel. I would want to know from someone, right? So. But other people are not like that. They're kind of like, I don't need to know that. Like, I don't, you could keep that to yourself. I'd rather just let this be a peaceful day, that kind of thing. You know what I mean? And I'm like, how do you live like that? So like, how do you deal with those?
That's because it's not real. Like I'm
yes.
with you, right? Because when you're dealing with people on a surface level and they're not really telling you how they feel about. I mean, at least that's how I feel. I feel like then I don't really have a real connection with that person, right? In
That's
that
right.
situation.
That's right.
And it's hard to, when you talk about the work environment, isn't it hard to speak up in that work environment? How do you find that balance of saying something in a way that's direct so you can get the results or the respect that you feel like you deserve, but it not then coming back to you in a negative way, and you're not being gaslit as if you're the problem. And I think that's the space that people find it very hard to navigate.
I mean, there are ways to do it, but this is, I want to hear from Ava. There
Yeah,
are ways
sorry.
I feel like you can.
Sorry, Ava, the expert. Let's get the
No,
expert in
this
here.
is perfect. Perfect lead in. And what you guys are talking about is absolutely right. It begins with filtering toxic communication, right? So you don't have to win every argument. Shawna, you talked earlier about like, I get into these heated discussions with people, right? You can discern what's worth your energy, right? Because some of these discussions, remember, the discussions are rooted in sometimes hate, fear, but also biases. So some of these discussions and biases are almost always untrue. So you're literally wasting your time having an argument with somebody that believes something that's not real,
that you
or
can't change.
or just reacting based on what they believe to be true, which is fine. That's their truth, but it's not yours. So why waste your time? So discern the communication.
Didn't I say it? I said it. I said it. Now I said it.
You said it.
I told her that.
So the next is awareness of your digital diet. Clear your history, right? Know what you're taking in. Be aware of it. Know your sources and take regular breaks from the screen, right? In order for you to check back in with yourself. I don't talk about spirituality a whole lot in any of my workshops, but I got to tell you, it comes up every single time. God comes up. People always talk about inner self and how they reconnect with their inner self when they take breaks from screens. And so take breaks and all kinds of gifts will come your way. The next one is connection. Connect with trusted individuals. Schedule time with those who nourish your soul, right? As opposed to having difficult conversations with people that, aren't really sure about what is actually happening in the environment, right? They're just sure about what's happening internally. Like focus on connecting with the people that do bring you joy and the connections that bring you joy.
You know what you said? You just dropped some gems right there, because when you talk about the digital diet, right? Like, kind of taking your breaks, it's not something I'm all over it when it comes to my children, right? Like I'm all over them about taking breaks from, television, social media, whether it be online gaming. But when it comes to myself, I am definitely doom scrolling these days. Let me tell you, I I just like, I got to know what's going on. Like, I feel like if I'm disconnected from things are changing so rapidly right now. I feel like if I'm disconnected from that information, somehow I'm going to miss something.
Thank you, Shawna. And Shawna, I think you'll appreciate this fourth strategy or antidote for surviving in a toxic culture is reconnecting with nature, right? Right. It's just so simple, guys. It keeps us connected to the source and to the true nature of who we are. So either being out in nature, right? Appreciating the air, the trees, the soil, growing a garden, like learning how to do that. The internet tells us everything. Go on there and use it for that. But also if you have pets, some people out there have pets, pay attention to your pets. At one point, I was really frustrated with my little golden doodle because I noticed that he was favoring my husband over me. But then I had to check in with myself and say, well, what's going on? And what I noticed was my habits. I have been coming in from work, putting my bag down, feeding myself, taking a shower, going to bed. I wasn't giving him love. And guess what? He was like, I ain't got no use for you. And so, right, connecting with nature will bring you closer to yourself.
So true. And can we talk about some of those things you can do? Because I actually practice it regularly. I ground myself. Whether I have, now that the weather's getting warmer, I'll go outside barefoot. I tell my daughter she can go out barefoot, which she loves for me to tell her to do. and or hug a tree. I know it sounds corny or cheesy, but touching and coming into contact with nature is so important. And you could do that with the gardening. So I am doing my little herb garden this spring.
That's
So
right. That's awesome, Shawna. And you know what that also does is it gets you out and moving your body, which is the next one. So moving your body with intent and purpose on a regular basis, right? Our lifestyles are very sedentary. We do a lot on screens, well, especially since COVID, right? We're in like, even what we're doing right now is virtual and we're sitting in a space. We're connected, but we are still not moving, right? And so moving your body is important. Another one is pattern recognition, journal. So when you journal, so some folks don't like journaling because they're like, what am I going to, get out of that? Well, the reality is you get information, right? I'm not telling you to journal because it's going to make your life better. I'm telling you to journal so that you can recognize the patterns so that you can change your behaviors, which will make your life better. Also, rest. Trisha Hersey, if you're familiar with Trisha Hersey's Rest is Resistance, you need to rest. Rest is resistance is not laziness. It's reclaiming your time and your humanity. I'm doing a workshop in a couple weeks in June. It's actually June 28th around Rest is Resistance. It's a little book. I call it a book club, but it's really a 1-day thing where we're all going to get the book ahead of time, read the book, come together with our blankets and yoga mats, and really reflect on the systems that prevent us from engaging in resting our bodies, minds, and spirits. And the last one, as we talked about earlier, is accountability and radical accountability. This is so important because it can transform pain into power and rupture into repair. Radical accountability means you acknowledge when you've harmed someone. It means you acknowledge when your language was divisive. It means you acknowledge when you started a thing that maybe you believe to be true, but over time you learn that, wait, there's another way to do this. And so that's acceptance, right? And accepting that maybe perhaps you've unknowingly caused some harm. And once you are able to do that, right, people become aware of your humanity, which gets them closer to theirs. Like we are, right, there's a thing called mirror neurons. Like when I behave a certain way and you watch that happen, you reflect that. And so let's be one another's reflection by being accountable, because it spreads in a good way, right? Like my young person said, we all need time to heal and time to unlearn the lessons that they taught us.
Okay, there you go again with that exclamation mark. This conversation has been really healing for me, honestly. I think we learned a lot. You go into a conversation. This has happened so much. We're in season 3 now, but I can say that, looking back on the last 2 seasons and now to come to here, there's been so many things that I feel like we've learned. And that really is the reason we wanted to do this, Ava, is because although there's so much out there, there's so many podcasts, we still believe that there are people out there who's looking and need what we need. Right. And so we just wanted to bring the things that we felt would fulfill us to the forefront for others, and that's ultimately why we chose to do this. I thank you so much for just sharing your gifts and things that you've experienced and you've worked so hard to come to in your life to the rest of us. I hope that you can send us the information on all the things that you're doing, because you're doing so much important work. I actually resonate with the things that you're doing, because I think my spirit feels fulfilled when I'm able to help people in the same way. And I know that I've said this so many times. It's not by mistake that I've landed into human resources. So please do share all the information with us so that we can share with our listeners, so we can all be healed.
Dee, you just made some really good points. And honestly, really where I see a lot of what you said, or when we talk about recognizing patterns, right, or that common denominator, I hear loud and clear, work on yourself. Work on yourself as much as possible. Take radical accountability about how you show up in your world, right, from the inside out. And that will continue to inspire people to do the same. That energy is real. And everything I've been reading and hearing, would you say that's 100%. Accurate, Ava?
100%.
Do I got that right? Okay. All right. So that's a lot of what I've been doing too, just a lot. And because I always say, like, how does working on me help others? But just in even what you said just now really just supports that thinking. I want to, I know you're doing so much. You're doing the Trauma Bonded Sisters workshops. You're doing this healing in a toxic culture kind of workshop. Can you tell people what maybe some workshops you have coming up, as well as any other information, how they can find you and maybe work with you directly?
So I mentioned Rest is Resistance, which is a book club that's coming up in June. Identifying Generational Trauma is also coming up July 12th. I'm actually going to be one of the presenters for the Heal Thy Women, actually Women Heal Thy Soul. I think that will happen after this airs, so you can block that out. But I can be reached or found at my website, my primary website, which is www.avahart.com. And my nonprofit website is the Heart Wellness Collaborative, Inc. I can be found in both of those places. So another thing that I'll say briefly is the Heart Wellness Experience is a new initiative that I am talking to folks about. And actually, I am in the process of attempting to gain major capital to produce a device, a hardware that I've developed to help people, collective groups, heal from trauma. And so I've been doing work both online and in person to help large groups of individuals heal from collective trauma. And the treatment model that I've developed can be generalized across demographics. So not just for Black women or Black men or the Black community, but can also be used with our Jewish community, can be used with clinicians, can be used for, I actually recently met with a local school system that had a big loss. And so I was able to meet with over 50 people at once using my treatment model to help people begin to heal from trauma. And the way that I do that is by using a bilateral stimulation music that was created by the Heart Wellness Experience. So that's more to come around that.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing. That is like,
I love that.
I mean, you get so many props for the things that you're doing to really help heal people, because it's needed. It's so needed right now. Although this is season 3, we are continuing our tradition of one small change. And Ava, what that is, we want to kind of give our audience a takeaway. What is one small thing that they can do in their life? And I like this saying. People might think it's weird. It's like, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time, right? So, what is that one bite, that one small change that people can do in their lives to impact it in a positive way? So, right, there's so many important things that we can do, right? And so to pinpoint the most important, since our discussion today is about healing, I would say develop a mantra for forgiveness. Every day, just say to yourself, I forgive myself for blank. I forgive myself for oversleeping. I forgive myself for telling a white lie. I forgive myself. Like every day, wake up in a place of gratitude and forgiveness for self.
Thank you so much, Ava. We are wrapping up episode 1, season 3 with Ava, who's been a phenomenal guest. Thank you guys for co-labbing with us, and we'll see you next time. Subscribe.
That's right. Hit that like button.
This has been an amazing episode. I'm happy to be back.
Yes,
Eva.
Thank you for joining.
Happy to have you. You kicked us off the season right. That's right. You kicked us off right.
Yes. Yvonne's going to make me look like a professional.
You are.